Next on this special edition of Currents News. Milestone anniversary. It's a celebration 2 centuries in the making. The Cathedral Basilica of St. James serving the faithful of New York for 200 years.
What is constant here is the proclamation of the gospel, the celebration of the Eucharist, and the encounter with God's mercy.
Migrants in New York, they keep coming. Another busload arriving at Port Authority. Now the city has a plan so the migrant children don't miss a beat when it comes to their education. Plus, Kentucky chaos. 3 weeks after deadly floods, residents there are still trying to recover. The Tablet's national correspondent is keeping us updated. And priestly praise, the name of a late beloved pastor, won't be forgotten. The street outside of a Queens parish will be named for him. I'm Christine Persichetti. Currents News starts right now.
Generations have come to this community, sharing different cultures over these 200 years.
And while the community has changed, the gospel preached at the Cathedral Basilica of St. James has not. It's a celebration centuries in the making. Brooklyn Bishop Robert Brennan invited everyone to come to the special mass honoring the cathedral's 200th anniversary. And come they did, filling the pews at St. James and celebrating the Eucharist as parishioners there have been doing for decades. For 2 centuries, bishops and priests have processed up to the altar at St. James in Brooklyn.
Today's celebration marks an important moment for parish life in all of Long Island.
Sunday's Mass celebrated the 200th anniversary of the Cathedral Basilica of St. James, the first church built on Long Island. Before it was established in 1822, the Irish immigrants who lived in Brooklyn had to go to Manhattan to attend Mass.
Catholics had to take the Fulton Street ferry across the East River to attend Sunday Mass. You think crossing the Brooklyn Bridge and getting on the BQE is an adventure. You ain't seen nothing.
Brooklyn Bishop Robert Brennan was joined by Bishop John Barris of Rockville Center and New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan, who was the main celebrant and homilist.
This grand cathedral is evidence of a 2,000-year-old allegiance to the Lord's final mandate, go out to all the world.
The cathedral's storied history ties all 3 dioceses together.
We feel a special sense of belonging to each of our neighbors, and we appreciate that. We value those ties along with our unity of faith.
And even though the neighborhood surrounding the cathedral has changed over the years, Bishop Brennan says one thing has remained the same.
Much history has passed, and so many changes have taken place, coming and going. But you know, what is constant here is the proclamation of the gospel, the celebration of the Eucharist, and the encounter with God's mercy.
For 200 years, St. James has been sharing the good news with the people of Brooklyn. While the church was established in 1822, St. James was officially designated a cathedral in 1853 when the Diocese of Brooklyn was created. And in 1982, Pope St. John Paul II added the title of Basilica to its name just 3 years after the Holy Father made an unscheduled stop at the cathedral during his visit to New York City. You can read all about that visit and even more about the 200th anniversary Mass online at thetablet.org. And you can relive it all through the stunning photographs and in-depth reports found only on thetablet.org. While you're there, be sure to subscribe to the Tablet newspaper so you can get all the latest news in the Diocese of Brooklyn delivered straight to your mailbox. Just head online to thetablet.org and click subscribe. As buses from Texas continue to drop off migrants at Port Authority, New York City has unveiled a plan to help settle children that arrive into schools. It's all a part of what they're calling Project Open Arms. It aims to connect families with the resources they need to start the new school year come September 8th. The announcement comes after 2 more buses from Texas arrived Friday morning carrying 15 children, the youngest just 2 months old. And there on the ground welcoming these weary travelers is Catholic Charities. Charities of New York. The organization has been supplying food, clothing, shelter, and other supplies for migrants already in the Big Apple. And on Tuesday, Cardinal Timothy Dolan stepped up to the plate, meeting with migrants who say they are thankful for the assistance.
She's thankful to God for the help that she's received.
Jennifer is one of the hundreds of migrants who have arrived in New York City by bus from Texas during the past several weeks. But that bus ride was just part of her tough journey to get to the U.S.
It was very, very difficult to cross, and all the experiences that she's had. Natural phenomenon, weather, psychological, mental stress.
New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan met with Jennifer and some other migrants Tuesday at Catholic Charities Manhattan offices.
They've had a terrible journey, but yet they're filled. I don't see any animosity or they're filled with gratitude. They said people have helped us on the way. The church has been there.
Monsignor Kevin Sullivan, the executive director of Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of New York, says over the past 6 weeks, more than 1,500 migrants have arrived at their doorstep suddenly and unexpectedly.
Our staff is strained. They have sacrificed. Many asylum seekers have arrived hungry. They have been provided with food. Some have needed clothes, and they've received clothes.
And they provide these services because it's how Catholics respond.
We try to see with the eyes of Jesus, and he's the one who said to us, when I was a stranger, when I was an immigrant, you welcomed me.
But Catholic Charities is calling on the federal government to help them help the migrants, people who have escaped horrific situations looking for a better life.
She's come here for a change, for a better life, for more opportunities, and she wishes to work hard and contribute.
Catholic Charities is also working to ensure the children are enrolled in school for the fall. Cardinal Dolan says scholarships have been made available for those who wish to attend Catholic schools. You can learn more about immigration from the Bishop Emeritus of Brooklyn, Nicholas DiMarzio. He's extending his knowledge as a recognized expert on migration to the tablet in his column, Walking with Migrants. In it, he tackles all things immigration, whether it's policymaking, grassroots efforts, or current events. The monthly column is a must-see for Catholics in both Brooklyn and Queens and around the country. It's about that time of the year when everyone is trying to get in those last few beach days before summer comes to a close. Well, last Monday, Blessed Trinity and Breezy Point combined the shore and faith by celebrating Mass on the beach.
Do this in memory of me.
The service in the sand, led by Bishop Brennan, celebrated the solemnity of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The Mass included 500 parishioners and the traditional blessing of the waters. Bishop Brennan, who was the main celebrant, was especially happy to have the chance to connect with Christ on the coast.
I always used to tell people in Ohio that the two things I miss the most are my family and the ocean. And I am thrilled to be back here around the ocean and around these beautiful scenes, especially this late time of summer.
This was the second time Bishop visited Breezy Point so far. Hopefully he can get in some more beach days before the summer ends. And from the shore to the streets, a summer staple has returned to the streets of Bensonhurst. The Feast of Santa Rosalia taking over 18th Avenue once again Thursday night. The 11-night feast features live band performances, rides, and carnival games, all in honor of Saint Rosalia, the patron saint of Palermo. On the last day of the feast, there will be a procession, which includes a marching band from the chapel of Santa Rosalia to St. Dominic's Church, where they will then celebrate Mass. Looks like a lot of fun. There's a lot more news headed your way. It hasn't been an easy couple of weeks in Kentucky after floods washed away homes. How the Catholic Church is helping, exclusive reports from our national correspondent. Plus this.
And I think it's going to be another very successful year.
No teacher shortage here. The vicar for schools in the Diocese of Brooklyn says a nationwide crisis hasn't affected them. And a Catholic priest who lost his battle with cancer, how the borough of Queens is honoring him.
There are now some big changes to the tablet website. You can get personalized access to the Catholic news you value. Sign up for free at thetablet.org.
More than 2 weeks since the flooding ended in Kentucky, and there's still widespread devastation, people picking up literal pieces of their lives. But standing by their side, the Catholic Church rolling out donated relief items like food and clothing, helping with short-term and long-term recovery. For the past week, the national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, John Lavenberg, has been on the ground in Kentucky, reporting the real stories of people who lost everything and have turned to the church for help. Only about 1% of the state has federal flood insurance. On Thursday, John was in Hazard, Kentucky, a place that has never flooded before. Currents News' Michelle Powers asked him what underinsured survivors should even do next.
A lot of the people here, what they're doing, they come here to see what federal assistance is available by way of loans or grants, and they're coming here to get whatever federal assistance they can. Now, I will say, other than that, I was driving around. A lot of people are still at their homes today. There's still a lot of people clearing out debris, still a lot of people just assessing their area and still figuring out what to do next.
All right, let's talk about those other communities. The places that have been hit predominantly so hard are coal mining towns, and those are especially ill-equipped. They are some of the poorest counties in the United States. Have you heard anything about these people's plans? Do they plan to just leave?
You know, it's actually really interesting. I was in Jackson, and Jackson was hit last year by flooding, and so a lot of people there, they want to relocate because they just finished remodeling trailers, homes that were destroyed last year, and then this happened, and so now they don't see a point in rebuilding again. They don't feel safe unless it's on much higher ground. Here, like you said, they haven't experienced the flooding before, and when it comes to relocating, you know, what people have told me is it's tough, and this also exists in Jackson, where a lot of people have been born and raised here, their entire families are here, these are their communities, this is what they're known, this is what they're comfortable with. And so it's still going to be very hard for a lot of people to pick up and leave these communities just because of these floods, but they do recognize the precarious situation they may now be in.
All right, so in the future, we may see a lot of abandoned towns out there in Kentucky, but it's really a warning for other communities around the U.S. We've seen unthinkable floods become more common, and let's talk about federal flood zones. Those maps have been substantially underestimated the risk in many parts of the country. We know right here, Hurricane Sandy, but was that the case out there in Kentucky, and are people angry at the government?
You know, it does look like from what I've seen that those maps did underestimate. Like you said, Hazard isn't in a flood zone. The people in Jackson, though, for example, this happened to them last year, so they knew that this was a possibility, though even they say, you know, 1,000-year flood is the phrase I keep hearing, that even something this bad was unimaginable. But, you know, as far as the maps go, and what the people inside told me was that there's about 20,000 communities that are on the federal flood protection program. Those 20,000 communities, they have more of a direct line to be able to get their people on insurance, and those communities go through a process to be able to be a part of that. Otherwise, people just have to see if their regular insurance providers will provide it.
That was the national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, John Lavenberg. On Monday, John will join us in studio to debrief about his trip. We'll talk about out-migration problems, where help is needed most, and how the church will continue its relief efforts. Those questions and more Monday on Currents News. Meantime, Kentucky is getting help not just from the local church, but the Church Universal. A big delivery of donations is coming from the Diocese of Brooklyn. The Knights of Columbus Monsignor Dillon Council mobilized two parishes, St. Luke's and Holy Trinity in Whitestone, to get supplies, making announcements during Mass and putting messages in the bulletins. The response? More than they could have hoped for. Carloads of donations were delivered last weekend. Now volunteers are loading them onto trucks so they can make their way down to Kentucky. If you missed that donation drive, there's still time to help. Just go to CatholicCharitiesLexington.org and click on Disaster Services to donate. On Tuesday, President Joe Biden signed the landmark Inflation Reduction Act, a massive spending bill that Democrats hope will reshape much of the American economy. Now the Biden administration is hitting the road in anticipation of the November midterms. Chris Wynn has that story.
A victory lap for President Joe Biden Tuesday as he signed a sweeping $750 billion healthcare tax and climate bill into law.
Today offers further proof that the soul of America is vibrant, the future of America is bright, and the promise of America is real and just beginning.
The Inflation Reduction Act represents the largest climate investment in American history and makes major changes to health policy by giving Medicare the power to negotiate the prices of certain prescription drugs for the first time.
The Inflation Reduction Act does so many things that for so many years, so many of us have fought to make happen.
Administration officials say the act will reduce the deficit and be paid for through new taxes, including a 15% minimum tax on large corporations and a 1% tax on stock buybacks. West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, a major holdout throughout the lengthy legislative process, played a key role in advancing the bill.
This is what the American people want, solutions and a balanced energy approach.
Democrats relying on a budgetary procedure to pass the bill along party lines with zero support from the GOP.
Democrats are catastrophically out of touch with what American families actually do care about, and their reckless taxing and spending proves it.
The win caps off a string of Democratic legislative successes the party hopes will translate to electoral success in the November midterms. Chris Wynn, Currents News.
Catholics across the country have praised the new legislation for offering clean energy incentives. However, the executive director of the Catholic Climate Covenant believes there is still much to do. In a statement, he says in part, the legislation is not perfect as it continues and expands some incentives for fossil fuel exploration and mining. Our work to help ensure a thriving world for generations must continue, particularly in already heavily polluted communities that need our solidarity. But in terms of actually reducing inflation, many are questioning if the legislation will work, especially now as the back-to-school shopping season picks up. Parents are grappling with higher prices on everything from backpacks to pencils.
I was surprised about the cost of like pens and paper and notebooks and all of that went up.
This year, the average American household will spend nearly $870 on back-to-school shopping. That's 40% higher than before the pandemic. Teachers are in short supply, too. According to the country's largest teachers union, the National Education Association, there is a shortage of nearly 300,000 educators and support staff across the nation. The situation is particularly bad in New York City. $100 million in existing federal aid is being made available just to hold on to teachers. But parents in the Diocese of Brooklyn don't have to worry about the teacher shortage. The vicar for schools in the diocese, Monsignor David Casado, is guaranteeing a full staff that offers a quality education.
I am very happy with the great teachers we have. We have good principals. We have great administration. And I think it's going to be another very successful year for 2022 to 23.
Monsignor Casado also said enrollment in Catholic schools in Brooklyn and Queens has been on the rise for the last 3 years. The first day of school for kids across the Diocese of Brooklyn will be on September 7th. So if you want to experience those amazing teachers and principals at Catholic schools around the diocese, just go to CatholicSchoolsBQ.org and click Find a School. There you can locate a school near you and apply online. Still to come on Currents News.
He really leaves a legacy of love.
His legacy lives on. Coming up next, how a Queens community is honoring a beloved priest who passed away. Almost 2 years after his passing, and the legacy of a Queens pastor still lives on. Father Andy Strazzeri served the people of Brooklyn and Queens for almost 50 years. Even in the late stages of a terminal cancer, he stood by his parishioners until he eventually returned to the Lord in September of 2020. Now, at his final assignment in Rosedale, Father Andy will have a lasting memorial fit for the influential priest, a street renamed in his honor. I talked to his niece, Chiara Montalto Giannini, about how the effort to remember Father Andy came about.
Someone from the Queens Borough President's office approached my mother and I, and they said, we love Father Andy. He's done so much for the community. We'd love to have a street name for him. And we said, great, that's great. And kind of put it in the back of our minds, you know, and then all of a sudden we were contacted by Father Daniel Kingsley, who's now the new pastor at St. Clair's, that the borough president had reached out and they set this up.
That's
really
so
beautiful.
nice. So he didn't just touch the hearts of Catholics, it was everybody in Queens, which is
much
really
so.
nice. And I know he served for about 4 decades in Brooklyn and Queens. Last was as pastor of St. Clair's, as you said, in Rosedale. So what kind of legacy did he leave behind?
He really leaves a legacy of love and of just reaching out to one another and encountering one another, listening to one another, and trying to help each other, trying to just be present and help one another. Actually, a longtime friend and mentee of my uncle's set up a really beautiful memorial endowment in his name.
Oh, nice.
That is to help immigrants and refugees and people in Brooklyn and Queens who maybe are having some financial difficulties with small one-time grants.
So I know a lot of people have been contacting you about your uncle and telling you some stories. Is there one story that kind of stands out you could share with us?
I really love the story of this person who's now a detective in the NYPD and a friend of mine. He was deployed in the military, and I believe in Afghanistan, from a young man from Brooklyn, and that was a hard thing. So he called the local priest. He called my uncle from abroad.
Oh, wow.
And they struck up a conversation and they developed this friendship over the phone. Ultimately, you know, they would talk, I don't know, every week, every couple of weeks.
That's so sweet, and to hear those stories must be so comforting. Tell us, what did your uncle mean to you personally?
Well, he was just the best, you know. I mean, he really was. We used to say that we were peas in a pod. He had a really great, warm way about him and a really silly sense of humor. And we had a lot of fun, you know. He was just joyful. He was a joyful, beautiful human being. And I have to say, even in his battle with cancer, he faced cancer with courage, with determination, with heart, and, you know, was amazing.
That was Father Andy's niece, Chiara Montalto Giannini. As Chiara mentioned, there is a memorial fund in Father Andy's name that's meant to help immigrants and refugees. To learn more about it and to make a donation, just go to CatholicFoundationBQ.org/Father Andy. That's CatholicFoundationBQ.org/Father Andy. And once again, if you want to go to the street renaming, that will happen at the corner of 137th Avenue and Brookville Boulevard in Rosedale, Queens, this Saturday, August 20th. There will be a mass at 9 a.m. followed by the ceremony at 11. Currents News will also have a full report come Monday. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Before we go, let's take one last look at the amazing celebration of St. James' bicentennial anniversary. Hope to see you again next time.
We have a lot to thank God for today.
Whenever we celebrate a church's anniversary, we're not just feasting over a building, are we? We think more of those living stones, a spiritual house, the faith that has been planted, nurtured, preached, and practiced here, the faith extolled by Jesus in this afternoon's Holy Gospel.